In this video I will sample this 7-inch record. It's a German Schlager record from 1976 and I will try to create a beat with sounds that I can find on this record. So I already listened to this record and there's not a good loop or a good portion that I can loop or a single note that I can turn into an instrument. So instead I'm gonna find multiple small or even tiny sounds and chop those and use all those small little pieces together to create some kind of part for my track, add some drums to it, probably a bass. So this kind of micro chopping technique is basically finding these little pieces and then putting them all together to create something. It's a bit more tricky than just using a loop or a single note. So let's just record the first bit of this record into Ableton and then let's go chopping.
Es tut so gut,
Es tut so gut,
es macht mir Mut,
es macht mir Mut,
bei dir zu sein.
bei dir zu sein. Two hearts in love, two hearts in love.
Ein Rendezvous,
Ein Rendezvous,
nur ich und du.
nur ich und du.
So this should be more than enough to sample. So let's start with the first chop. It's gonna be the first note. So the first part, this could work. Let's crop the sample already on the timeline before throwing it into sampler. So the first note of the piano is something that could be nice to use, especially when you pitch it down one octave. And then maybe we put the voices on 1 so we make it monophonic. It looks like it's in E, so let's change the root note. Let's put a low cut EQ on here. Alright, it's the first chop. Let's continue. Let's go back to the sample. So in this intro, maybe the second or the third note. So let's just throw it into, crop it here. So you don't have to crop on the timeline, you can just crop in sampler, right click and crop sample. Let's also change the release time, 100 milliseconds. So the second note. What if we loop this? Very small portion. So I'm gonna do the sustain mode backward, forward, and then add some crossfade. Maybe put this on mono, put a low cut EQ. And if we lower the octave, it's an old second-hand record, so there's a lot of vinyl crackle in this sample. So I'm trying to work around it. So let's see if we can adjust this to not have the crackle. So this seems to be a D, so let's change the root note. Detune it a bit. So this seems to work as a continuous sound. Maybe we should increase the attack a bit. So now that we have two micro chops, the first one sounds like this. Maybe this is a sound that we can repeat, like some kind of stutter effect. And then for the second one, it's a more continuous sound. We might want to use some effects later, but let's continue now for chop number 3. Let's listen a bit more to the sample.
Es tut so gut, es tut so gut.
So maybe we can use the vocal here that is kind of isolated. Let's crop this and add it to sampler number 3.
Es tut so gut, es tut so
Let's see if we can loop this as well. So maybe we can actually turn this into 2 sounds, because there's this kind of looped sound. That could be interesting. Let's leave that and then make a duplicate of this sampler and then maybe turn the loop off and just use the vocal bit. And maybe use this as a vocal chop. Go back to the other one, also put a low cut EQ on this one. Okay, so we ended up with 4 chops. Let's try to create some kind of pattern with these 4 samples before we continue chopping more samples or adding drums. Let's start with the first one. In the original pitch. And then the more continuous sound, maybe we put it a bit like this. Like this. Let's do 3 and then end with the vocal chop. Before we continue, let's add some basic drums. So we have kind of a reference. So I'm just going to go to my sample pack of vinyl drums and add a kick and a snare for the first 4 bars. So maybe we want to emphasize the first 2 chops by doubling the kick. And let's change. Let's change chop number 3 into a different sound, because it doesn't really work, I feel. And then let's chop number 3 back into the equation. Maybe with a bit of a stutter. Or change chop number 4 as well. With this chop, I'm gonna go sort of in between the sounds, so there's very little. But if you boost the volume, there's still something there. So it's kind of subtle, but I think it could work to fill up the space in this composition. Let's turn up the volume a bit. and the low-cut EQ. Now the volumes are a bit off, so let's change that. Let's also add a hi-hat to fill up more of the space. So again, I'm going to my sample pack, just a simple hi-hat. So this kind of works. It needs a bit more tweaking. Maybe I'm going to add some effects, and I definitely need a bass line to tie this more together. So the first thing I'm actually going to do is to work a bit more on the samples. So the first one, let's mute the drums. Especially the fourth one here can maybe use an auto pen. And the second one can use some reverb to make it a bit bigger. And the first one is very crisp, so maybe we can roughen it up by using a little bit of distortion. Okay, let's now add a bass line. I use the operator sub bass. We're just going to keep it very simple. Put a C in. One thing I like to change about the first note is quite high. Let's pitch it down a bit to see if that works better. A whole octave is maybe too much. But if we go to a G, and the repetition of the vocal sample is maybe nicer if we just don't do that and just have it once. If we expand this and just let it run, and it says so good. So it's basically simpler. Let's play it without drums. Let's change the drum pattern and then also the bass in the second bar. Because now with the repetition of the fourth sample, there's a bit more time before the kick comes in, so there's a bit more breathing room and a variation in the drum pattern. I'm actually quite happy with this result, because when I first listened to this record, the only thing that I kind of recognized that would be useful is that first note. But then when you kind of dig deeper and you pull out different things and you try some stuff, there are multiple sounds that were useful. The little open vocal sample, but also the fourth chop that's in between the sounds really, which is more sort of a noise, white noise kind of filler sound. And in the end, I used 4 different chops of this same record from the first 30 seconds. and it sounds pretty decent. Let me know what you think. In any case, this is a really fun exercise to take a record that doesn't seem to have anything and then just record it and start chopping, and most of the times you end up with something and you kind of surprise yourself. All right, that was it for this video. Keep making music. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one.